We're back for another week of defense with Coach DJ Eliot, longtime defensive coordinator at the FBS level. And today we're going to focus on Michigan. We'll get into some of the things they do with their personnel in multiple fronts, as well as some techniques they use to take away various routes and route combinations from the offense. And we'll get into one of Coach's favorite things, the sims, and something he looks for every week. I think Coach talks about a sim every week. So, Coach, great to have you back here this week, and we're excited to talk about the Michigan defense.
I'm glad to be here. It was fun to watch.
Let's start with some of the things that you noticed just on the basics of the approach of Michigan and what they're going to do versus various personnel groups. And you did see and noted that against 12 and 21, you're going to see 3-4 personnel, and then against 11 personnel, you're going to see a nickel and a four-man front. So talk to us what you saw and the reason that you feel Michigan was doing that.
Michigan is very similar to Georgia and Alabama, which we've already talked about, and the fact that their personnel that matched the offensive personnel would be 3-4 if it was 12 or 21 look, but then it would be a nickel defense if it was 11 personnel look. And versus 12 and 21, with that 3-4 personnel, I saw them in under, I saw them in some tight, I saw them in some bare. And Northwestern, I think, was trying to take advantage of that early because they were getting in 11 looks out of 12 personnel. So what they were trying to do is get Michigan to put their big people on the field and to call their big people defenses and attack them from 11 personnel formations and plays with 12 personnel out there. And early in the game, I don't know if it was just called or if it was checked, but from 12 personnel, Northwestern was in empty, and Michigan was in bare cover one, 2 snaps in a row against empty with their 3-4 personnel. I also saw them out of their 3-4 personnel running a pressure that's called strike, which is 2 off the edge from the field, and then trap coverage to the field, and then inverted halves to the boundary. And they ran this versus a twins formation, a slot formation. So there's 2 wideouts on one side, 2 backs, and a tight end to the other side. And you're trying to show with this pressure that you are in a single high defense, and that your outside backer to the field is just a rush, and that your safety, your field safety has come down and is covering number 2, and then your boundary safety is in the middle of the field, and then off the snap indicator, that field safety blitzes, and then the strong, or I should say field outside linebacker, runs a technique that I call a track, and then the boundary safety that's showing that he's the middle of the field player, he slides over and plays a half to the field, and then the corner plays a trap. So the disguise is we want to show single high, and we want to show that the field outside linebacker is coming as a rush player. And then off the snap indicator, you go into 2 off the edge from the field, and you play trap to the field. Now, those pressures, those techniques for those pressures off the field, when you bring 2 off any edge, the inside technique is called a track, which means he's going to attack the V of the neck of the tackle, and if the tackle blocks down, okay, he's going to come off his butt, bend and chase, and spill anything. But if the V of the neck of the tackle comes out, then he's going to come under. Mm-hmm. And then the outside pressure is called a razor. And a razor technique, his aiming point is the deepest back. He's going to the quarterback off of any boot or zone read look that he may get, and he's the contained rusher on a pass. And then it's a 2 trap coverage. Really common blitz from 3-4 teams versus 12 and 21 personnel offenses. You know, like I said, it marries with a single high outside backer rush from the field. Now with that, to the nub side, to just the tight end side, you know, you slant the line, and now the corner is playing inverted halves on the tight end, which means the outside backer is playing the flat. In the corner, it's a cheat half, which means he's going to line up at 8. He's going to play that vertical man-to-man once it declares vertical. But he's in the run fit now. And so where he fits is critical. You know, one thing as a defensive coordinator that I found can be a problem in defending the run is if you're not playing corners over, is getting your corners enough looks to where they fit versus nub tight ends, and making sure that they are executing the proper technique on defending the run. It's a common problem because that's not something that those guys do very often. It's not something that they do a lot in individual. It's not something that they do a lot in practice, but it's critical when it gets into the game if that corner doesn't fit in the right spot. Make sure if you're scheduling your practice as a defensive coordinator that you have a section for nub run fits for the corner. I think that that's critical, and I saw this corner in a good position for that.
So, Coach, when you're looking at that in practice, is that something you would fit into individual, or are you going to make sure those reps are in team? Do you do something with that guy in specific, maybe group drills or half line that you get him there? What's been your approach for how you practice those run fits with the nub corner?
Well, of recent, especially since COVID, and even before COVID, with the rules changing on how many times you can practice in training camp, with those changes, they've added walkthroughs. So there's, in the last 3 or 4 years, there's not as many practices that you used to have, but there's a lot more walkthroughs than you used to have. And so I think it's critical that you have very organized and detailed walkthroughs on techniques that you need to be able to execute in the game. And one thing that I used to do is in the off season and during training camp, we would go through segments of the walkthrough that were just individual techniques. And we would do individual techniques for run, and we would do individual techniques for pass. And so the corners don't have a lot of individual techniques for run. So I would make sure that the corners coach knew that, hey, when you have this time in the walkthrough, you better make sure that you're working nub run fits, because that's one where your run fit is critical to our success. We would get a lot of those reps for the corners and all those extra walkthroughs in that technique run segment for the corner. Then on my practice checklist, one of the things that I have on there to practice in either inside run, okay, or in a team setting, one criteria is nub runs. If I'm going to be a team that doesn't play corners over, then I'm going to make sure that I have a segment on my checklist of nub runs. And we're going to get it worked in training camp, and we're going to get it worked in spring ball so that those corners know exactly what their fit is versus a nub set.
Coach, the other thing that Michigan saw was an unbalanced look. What did you see in their adjustment to unbalanced?
Northwestern lined up in a 12 personnel unbalanced look. So they had 2 wideouts and they had 2 tight ends to the same side. And Michigan checked a rotated quarters from a 3-4 look, which is very common. And what that means is that they're playing quarters, but they're switching positions and they're rotating to make sure they have enough people there to stop the run. So, you know, the field safety is playing his quarter technique on number 2. The corner is playing his quarter technique on number 1. And then the boundary safety for them came over and played the quarter flat position, which is usually what the outside linebacker plays. But since it's unbalanced and there's more people over there, he came over and played that position, and then the outside linebacker pushed back into the box. So they checked a rotated quarters look out of 3-4, which is pretty common for an unbalanced set as a check. But what I thought was interesting is Northwestern shift back, and there's different things you can do when they shift back. All right. If they shift back, if they don't motion back, if they truly just shift back, you really have time to get back to the original call. The issue is that everybody has to remember what the original call was, right? And get it communicated and do all that. The other thing that you can do is you just have a check that you run if they shift back. And that's what Michigan did. Okay. So they shifted back and you could see everybody checked and everybody stayed in the same position. Everybody just bumped over, and the corner just played the tight end man-to-man, and they stayed in that rotated quarters coverage to the field. So Michigan did a good job of checking their defense to unbalance, and then also executing their check that they do after they've made their unbalanced check, if the offense shifts back into a normal set. And they stopped them and they played good defense. And I thought that was impressive. Out of 11 personnel, that's when they were more of a four-man front and they were in nickel defense. And some simulated pressures were showing up. It's like I said, it's becoming the trend. Simulated pressures are becoming the trend in college football this year. And one simulated pressure that I saw Michigan run is two from the field, which is the nickel and the outside backer from the field coming off the edge. And again, those are the same techniques. Those are tracks and razors. They're just different people doing it. And they were rotating down to a match 3 coverage with that. So what that means is you want to show a 2 high, and you want to show that nickel is in quarters as the apex player. And then off the snap indicator, he's going to come off the edge and be the razor, and the outside backer is going to be the track. And then the boundary outside backer, which, the offense would call these guys defensive ends because it's a 4-man front. But if you're a 3-4 guy, they're outside linebackers because they're standing up. Mm-hmm. And so the boundary outside backer becomes a drop, and then the field safety drops down and replaces the nickel, and the boundary safety rotates and plays the middle of the field. And now you're just playing cover 3 or match 3. It's a great simulated pressure. It's the most common one. You're getting pressure off the field and you still got 7 in coverage. And then another one that I saw him run, which is one of my favorite ones, is a middle simulated pressure. A lot of times when the simulated pressures are run, the end or outside linebacker, whatever you refer to him as, away from the pressure is a drop. So if somehow as an offense you can figure out where the pressure is coming from, you can also figure out which outside linebacker is a drop. Well, this middle pressure, the outside linebacker away from the pressure is not a drop. The outside linebacker to the pressure is the drop. Okay, it's a great changeup. And the way that they set it up, which I think is a great way to set it up, is they line up in a 3 and a G, and then the inside linebacker to the back runs the sim. And so what they're doing is they're, like I talked about before, is anytime you run a simulated pressure, whoever has the one-on-one on the back must win. So what they're doing is they're guaranteeing, if they're a slide away from the back team, that they're going to get that one-on-one with the linebacker and the running back, but they're only going to be in a 4-man rush. And they did that, and they executed it to a T. Now, another thing that I like about this simulated pressure is the safety now is replacing the inside backer that's running the pressure. And this particular pressure was run versus trips, and they were in cover 3 when they were running it. Well, the weak hook defender in cover 3 is also the 3 over player. 3 on an over is a weakness to cover 3, so you have to assign somebody to match that if 3 goes on an over. And a lot of times the weak hook defender is an inside linebacker, and sometimes that's a mismatch with a speed number 3 and an inside linebacker covering him on an over. Well, in this particular simulated pressure, the boundary safety replaces the drop of the inside linebacker, and he became the 3 over player. And 3 did run an over, and he had it covered. He was coming from depth, so he's able to play it easier than an inside linebacker, and his skill is better to cover an over than an inside linebacker. And they ran it on 3rd down. It was really well executed, and that's one of my favorite sims to run for sure. And then, they were also running week 3, and the reason they were running just straight run in week 3 is because they were running a lot of quarters. And so that's a great disguise for quarters. Week 3 is the boundary safety coming down into the box because the mic is out there on 3. The mic is out there on 3, so it looks like it's quarters, The inside backers pushed like they're on like the mic is on number 3 and the will linebackers on the other side, so it looks like it's a quarters concept, but then you drop the safety down and it's really a cover 3 concept. And when they're running quarters, they were running, it was almost all 11 personnel. I didn't see any 10, okay? So it was 12 and it was 11 was what Northwestern was giving them. And so when they were running their quarters, they were versus a Trey set, which that's a 3-by-1 with a tight end to me. They were giving the Mike linebacker the vertical of the tight end. They're saying, hey, this tight end is a guy that our linebacker can cover on a vertical. And they were playing 3-over-2 on the 2 wideouts to the field, and they were just continuing to play a quarters concept to the single receiver side with the boundary safety. Now, again, that's a great disguise to drop into week 3 where that safety comes down to the box and you play a single high. But it's also good for the run because that quarter safety can be involved in the run because he's not responsible for any vertical. The Mike has the vertical of the tight end. So he's involved in the run game. And if it's a pass, the way you coach that quarter safety to the X receiver side is to key the release of X. And if X inside releases, then you double X. And if X outside releases, then you look to help on any over route. And they were doing an excellent job of that coverage. Then, Northwestern tried to attack them with a boot too, and they ran split zone boot sail in quarters. And that's a good way to attack quarters.
Yeah.
But the quarter flat defender to the field did a great job of playing it. So if you're a quarter flat defender versus boot, you have to be able to defend the sail. And that technique is called sail out. As soon as you recognize that it's boot, or even if you recognize that it's a sail route, okay, you want to sail out with your technique. And what that means is, okay, is you want to run at a 45 to the numbers and get underneath the sail route and then get your butt to the sideline like a cover 2 corner. So, cover 2 corners versus smash, how they drift off and they turn their shoulders and they play in between the hitch and the corner route, and they read the quarterback's shoulders to determine if they should break on the corner or whether they should break on the hitch. It's the same thing in quarters for the quarter flat defender versus sail. If he gets sail, he wants to push to the numbers and then get his butt to the sideline and play it like a cover 2 corner. So now he wants to hold the sail route, but also be ready to pick up the back and the flat based off the shoulders of the quarterback. And they did a great job of that. They ran boot sail into quarters, and it was split zone boot. And this quarter flat defender, he had that sail covered because of his sail out technique of running to the numbers and then getting his butt to the sideline and being able to play that sail to the flat, high to low, based off the quarterback's shoulders. Now, they also, anytime you run a boot, you always have an over route too. If number 3 is not blocking the end, in this scenario he wasn't, it was split zone boot, so the fullback was going to the flat, I'm counting on the rush to stop the over. If number 3 doesn't block the edge rusher, then the rush should be there before you can throw the over route. Okay, now it was a nub set and the corner grabs it, which he should, but you don't need anybody underneath it if there's nobody blocking the end, because the rush should be able to pull up the quarterback before he can get to the over route. Okay, and anytime you're an end versus boot, it's critical that you contain then force. So what that means is you have to have the quarterback contained. So, sometimes the quarterback will get outside of you. Well, you want to run flat down the line to try to get him contained. Okay, you don't want to run up the field to force him if you don't have him contained. You want to run flat down the line and try to meet him on the line of scrimmage. But once you have him contained, it's critical that you force the throw. And so an end versus boot has to be a contain first, but then force. So he wants to contain the quarterback, but then force the throw. He has to do that versus boot, and they did a great job of that at Michigan playing that.
Coach, let's talk a little bit about that end on boot. So you see multiple variations. You mentioned the kind that, somebody's going to be there to give him a block. You mentioned a true naked where there's nobody there, nobody coming towards him. I know for me, one of the things when we looked at our naked package was that we always wanted somebody to affect that guy. Now, we weren't going to block anybody on him, but we ran it a lot off of, split looks where we had somebody coming across or a fullback coming at him, etc., with the idea that we wanted that guy to, for a lot of what we would see in our conference at least, was wrong arm technique. We wanted that guy to wrong arm, and then we had him, right? We were going to get the edge regardless because he turned his shoulders, and now that quarterback is just more athletic. But the difference is in that I like that technique, and I agree. If you put him down the line, you're going to get there and get him, and you do force quicker throws. But in that situation where a team's doing something to affect that end and getting him obviously to run fit, right? Attack the run first. What kinds of techniques do you like there versus a team who's going to do that? And how do you work a recovery if that guy gets too heavy into the run?
One of the most common is a pin boot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so where the tight end will pin the defensive end, okay, block, and then release. And so it's not always, like some people will say, whoever's covering 3, if he blocks the end, then you pull the trigger. Well, what's going to happen is you're going to get beat on pin boot. And some people say the way that you stop pin boot is as soon as he pins the defensive end now has the tight end to the flat, and then the Mike backer pulls the trigger.
Got it.
So that's one answer that some people have is as soon as he pins, we just switch responsibilities. So now the Mike pulls the trigger for contain, and as that end releases to the flat, the defensive end takes it to the flat, okay? But, boot sail is one of the most common routes versus boot or naked, all right? And so when you sail out the quarter flat defender, you can give up some yards when he dumps it to the flat by the time that quarter flat defender reacts. So I like to have the 2 inside backers kind of key 3. And if 3 releases to the flat, all right, then the Mike grab him, and now that allows, or the inside backer of that side grab him, and now that allows the quarter flat defender just to play the sail, and that allows the end to contain. But if they run a pin scheme, then the Mike backer, now he can add on, and then the backside backer could pick up the pin to the flat. So anytime you run boot, your inside linebackers, if you're in a zone defense, you're not in a man defense, your inside linebackers, the coaching points are robot and radar. And what that means is robot is the rollover player. So one of them is playing underneath the over, and then the DB that's covering the over is playing on top of the over. And then the radar player is the guy like I'm talking about that's going to try to figure out if he should take 3 to the flat or if he should second tank to the quarterback.
Got it. How about that split look? Again, whether that's out of 21 and the fullbacks coming towards that end and then getting flat, or you're like in 11 and you're bringing that tight end who's off the ball all the way across into the flat, but that feel of some kind of a split zone there.
So one way that you can get an edge on that is the tight end, and we key this on defense. If he's running split zone, he's to the heel line of the offensive line. And if he's running split zone boot, there's a lot of space between him and the offensive line. So a lot of times the defensive ends, they recognize that you're just trying to avoid them based on the depth that the tight end is from the offensive line. And so you can get a technique edge there with your end. Every problem, Keith, on defense, and I'm sure on offense too, there's 2 ways to fix every problem, right? There's technique or scheme.
Right.
You can either fix it with your technique or you can fix it with your scheme. And one technique fix for that particular split zone boot is the recognition of the tight end and the depth that he is from the offensive line, and the defensive end knows not to wrong arm it because of how much space that tight end is from the offensive line. And if you're on offense, that's something that you want to look at and make sure that you're doing so that they can't get a beat on that.
Right. Yeah, we actually would spend a lot of time on that technique because it was, something we did often. We liked that naked package with him coming across on our runs and then getting into the flat. So we always, a lot of teams I see will just try to slip that and avoid contact. We said we want contact. We don't want collision. We want contact. What we would do is just work a technique as we're coming into that guy. Is we're just ripping our arm across, almost like you would wrong arm. We're kind of wrong arming that guy, getting across his face and trying to make it a contact, but not a full collision there. So, what we really want is to induce him to really get everything into that block, potentially turn his hips and wrong arm. And that was the win for us. So I agree. If you can read that and you see the depth of it, and it's a team that's avoiding the contact, is definitely a key for you. I think it does become tougher if teams do really try to get a piece of that guy before he goes.
I agree. That can be difficult.
Coach, you mentioned that you saw some stress to the trips. Talk to us about what that is and what you saw from Michigan.
Northwestern was in trips, 3 true wide receivers. Instead of playing a mini concept or a stubby concept, which those are read 3 concepts, I saw a couple snaps where Michigan played stress, which stress is the corner is playing in between 1 and 2. He's sinking, playing depth and divider in between 1 and 2. And the field safety is playing in between 2 and 3. And that allows you to leave your boundary safety back to double X. And they were playing cloud, I think, back on the backside. And it allows you not to get beat on many stubby beaters. And it allows you to play a less athletic nickel or to play true 4-3 personnel so that the nickel / Sam backer doesn't have to be responsible for number 2 on a vertical. They ran that a few times and had a lot of success with it. And I think you line up there and you show that you're in a read 3 concept, and that's what Michigan did. And then the corner shows that he's man on 1, and then he bailed. He bailed to depth and divider between 1 and 2, and then the safety was playing in between 2 and 3. And they made some hay with that, and I thought it was effective. And it's a trips adjustment that, like I said, allows you to keep a double on X, but not have to worry about the matchup of the nickel / Sam on the vertical at number 2 to the field.
Coach, we always like to talk about some situations, and I know you noted some things on third downs this week. Talk to us about what you saw from Michigan on the third downs.
One thing that I saw that I thought was really good is they ran a 5-man, man-free pressure versus 11 personnel, but the safety that was coming down came down to the back. So 2 things that were good there is the matchups looked like their back was more athletic than their tight end. This is Northwestern. So they were able to get a more athletic player on the back for when he released. But also it gives you the disguise that you're in quarters to 3-by-1 because the mic is out there man-to-man on the tight end, and that's the same alignment that he would have been in a 2-high look because he would have to remove himself from the box with trips. So this was a way to play man-free, and this was even a 5-man man-free, and drop the safety down and give a 2-high look and take advantage of 2 things. One, the matchups, because they had a better cover guy on the better athlete on offense, and 2, the disguise. And Michigan, throughout the whole game, did an excellent job on their safety disguise. I mean, they were holding them late, and rotating either direction really good and did an excellent job in disguise. Another thing I saw on third down was Northwestern was 3rd and 1, and they got in cut splits by the O-line, and the quarterback got under center, and Michigan went to a sneak check. They went to a double eagle look, and the mic walked up. Well, when they did that, Northwestern looked to the sideline and checked. Well, Michigan did a great job. They got out of it. When Northwestern looked to the sideline and checked, they got out of it, and they went back to their original call, and Northwestern threw a route to the flat, and Michigan was there to defend it. So that is an excellent job of being able to adjust on the run. And once you make a check, once the offense makes a check, being able to get out of it and check into something else. And there's different ways to do that. You know, when the quarterback looks to the sideline, you have to practice where, you know, the linebackers and the safeties make a call that alerts the whole defense that they need to look to the sideline.
Mm-hmm.
But you never want the D-line to look to the sideline. You know, because teams will have that fake look where they'll look to the sideline and then they'll snap it to the running back and run a run play. You always want your D-line in their stances down and ready to go.
Great coaching point.
And so, you know, we would never allow the D-line to look. We would allow the linebackers and the safeties to look. And then, you know, they would communicate the calls to the D-line and the corners. And so as soon as, you know, quarterback looks to the sideline, somebody alerts, hey, you know, look. And then those guys on defense look over, and then they communicate the call to the D-line and the corners so that those guys are always ready to play regardless.
So, Coach, you mentioned that with the D-line, and I 100% agree, because if you're looking with the D-line, I know teams are going to scheme you up and try to trick you. Now, I don't know if you remember seeing it last year. I believe it was the Alabama-LSU game, or maybe it was 2 years ago. I can't remember, but in that game, the corner was pressed. They looked to the sideline, and as soon as they looked, they snapped the ball, and he was beat, you know, on a fade route down the sideline. Do you have any coaching points for your guys that when they're looking from the corner, do you like them to back off first to avoid that situation? Or what kinds of things have you done to make sure that they can't get you there?
Again, I like the safeties and the linebackers to do the look, and I like the corners to stay in coverage, and I like the D-line to stay with their hands down in technique. And then the communication is from the safeties and the linebackers to the D-line and to the corners. I don't want those guys to be in that situation.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if I had a press corner, I would want him to stay as a press corner, and then he would have to count on the communication from the safety in order to get that.
Right.
Now, here's the ironic thing. You offensive guys don't think about this. Where do we have noise and communication problems on defense is the opposite of what you guys have on offense. We don't have noise problems on road games because when the opposing team's offense is on the field, everybody's quiet.
Right.
Right. We have noise problems on home games. So our communication, sometimes we have to practice it. I always thought it was ironic is we'd play 3 home games in a row and never practice crowd noise. You know, if I was working for an offensive head coach, and then the first away game, we had crowd noise that we're practicing. And I was like, well, we've had this problem for 3 weeks. We never practiced it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, good point.
Away games, you know, it's easier for a defense to communicate on away games because the opposing team's crowd is quiet when the offense is on the field. Back
to the pressures, the double mug zero. A lot of double mug. I've seen that quite a bit here over the last few years. Certainly has become popular, and something that Michigan does, the double mug zero.
I saw Michigan get into a double mug look and then run a zero pressure out of it. And the 2 inside backers were both coming, but they were reading the slide of the center. And so whichever inside backer got the slide, which means the center came to him, then he popped out and he became a rat player. And when he did this guy got underneath. It was like a 3rd and 8 or something. And he did a good job because he got enough depth to the sticks, and he got underneath over route that prevented the quarterback from completing it. Got in his vision and made him throw it high. And I think that's an excellent way to run a double A-gap pressure with the 2 inside backers, especially if you're in a zero because you got all that space for them the offense to complete it behind you, is whoever gets the slide, pop out because you're a waste. The other guy is going to get the one-on-one on the back, which is what you want.
Yeah. And
so now that guy can be a factor, you know, in throwing lanes for the quarterback. And they did a great job of that. I also saw him on 3rd down run 1 cross. So, you know, in cover one, you can the safety that comes down in cover 1, you can assign him different places to come down. He can come down to the tight end, which would be like a 1Y concept, okay? He could come down to the running back, which is what we talked about already, okay, which would be like a 1T concept, okay? Or if it's a 4-man rush, man free, that means you're going to have, you know, a low hole defender. Or he could come down and he could be the low hole player. And to me, and I call that one cross. And the good thing about one cross on third down is he can come to a depth of the sticks and be able to defend routes at the sticks and show a too high look for a long time. I think it was 3rd and 8, and Michigan ran one cross, and that safety came down about right at 8 yards. And sure enough, there was a dig route at 8 yards, and he was right there to prevent the throw. And then the pressure got there, and they got off the field. So anytime you're in man free, you can assign the safety that's coming down to come down to 3 different locations. He can come down to 1Y, which means he comes down to the tight end. He can come down to 1T, which means he comes back down and covers the tailback, okay? Or, okay, he could come down and play one cross, which means it's the safety away from trips usually because you're cutting away from speed. He comes down and he plays the hole, and on third down it's critical that he comes down from the sticks down, that his cleats are in the ground at the sticks, and he plays everything top down. And they did that, and it was an excellent job.
Now, do you like those game plan to where he's going, or do you just carry a package of them and you account for it in the call?
So you put it in to where it's in the call, but then when you're going to call it is probably game plan. And so the tight end, the back, their personnel body types are critical because which one is going to be tougher for your linebacker to cover, right? Mm-hmm. Is their tight end going to be tougher to cover, or is their running back going to be tougher to cover? And so that's where you're going to want to put your safety, is to the guy that's tougher to cover. But also, like I talk about, is what's your other coverage, zone coverage that you're running, and what kind of look are you trying to show? You know, if you're trying to show a too high look, then a 1T or a one cross would be great because that has the linebacker out on the tight end versus trips. And so that's the same look that he's going to show in zone. But if you're playing cover 3 maybe as your zone, then you're going to want to run 1Y so that it shows 2 inside linebackers in the box and that safety's coming down, you know, to show single high look. So matchups are critical to where you put that safety, and your opposing look is critical to where you put that safety.
Well, Coach, Michigan has a big game this week. They're number 6 going into the game. They're playing Michigan State, who I believe is number 8 going into the game. So big matchup here, obviously a big rivalry in the state of Michigan, so it's going to be a fun game to watch here.
I agree. It'll be fun to watch. Looking forward to it.
Coach, I look forward to speaking with you again next week after we watch some ball and get after it on the defensive side again.
Me too. Can't wait.